Respond check. Hey, good afternoon. Dr. Alan Christensen here with you, and welcome to another installment of Office Hours Live. Okay, getting things situated here, and we're all good. All right, got everything up and running, and I'm with you guys on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube Live. So yeah, good to connect here today. Okay, so Office Hours Live. If you've not been here before, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. I'll grab some of your top questions, and I've got a few that were sent in. Today's a special day because I've got a pretty big reveal also. Got a new cover to reveal, and I'll share with you guys. Love to hear where you're from. So let me hear where you're coming from today. Let me get to where I can see chat better. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm with you guys in beautiful northern Minnesota. Fall is quickly arriving. We've got Linda from Kaufman, Texas. That's cool. We usually get folks from all around the world, several parts of the country. It's always fun to see that. Yeah, so many are jumping on right now, and the image reveal, I'll have that in just a moment. So I'm with you on a couple platforms. I'll get this photo up afterward on Instagram. You'll see it live if you're with me on Facebook and YouTube. If you're on Instagram, hang tight. I'll get up in just a moment. Some folks in Instagram are from Albuquerque in France and Mexico, Texas, California, formerly Scottsdale, now in Salem, Massachusetts. Scottsdale's pretty cool. We were just down there a little over, I guess, last week, hanging out with my son for his birthday in Scottsdale and Fountain Hills. I love the Northwoods. It was great to see him and good to see our team, good to see some family, but I'm happy to be back up in the Northwoods. So yeah, welcome those who are coming on. Lots of really good questions. I got a bunch of Texans here with us. Lexi's back from Las Vegas. So Lexi, way back in the 80s, my dad was part of a company that was installing rolling shutters. We had an office in Henderson. So he and I would go from Kingman to Henderson all the time. And I was in junior high and I helped do installation. So I was doing like construction type work. But yeah, I've been around Vegas, Henderson area quite a bit. New York as well. More and more from Texas. That's cool. So go Texas. So here's the cover reveal. And again, my apologies. I'll get this to you guys on Instagram out right afterward, but I've been working on this for quite a while and really excited about this. So my earliest gigs were always in food. I worked in restaurants. I cooked quite a bit. You know, and my health transformation was really a food transformation. I was 12 and I decided to try to not be so unhealthy and try to lose some weight and, see if it could change my health in some way. And it was reading about food and taking control of my own diet in some ways that just changed all of this. So I first started dabbling, making my own meals then, and then I cooked professionally for quite a while. But all the transformation's been food related. And I've always loved putting recipes in the books. And I've enjoyed that. I love cooking for people. It's one of the ways I show my love and affection. So it's been a natural extension to build out an actual cookbook. And so coming up, we're looking at March of 23 will be the Hormone Healing Cookbook. I'm here in a spot where I did tons of the recipes and spent some time finishing up the manuscript, but this is exciting. So these are recipes that heal the top 5 hormonal symptoms. And you can use these to help feel better in a specific way, but they're also approved to use on the adrenal reset, the thyroid reset, the metabolism reset. So the one thing I've heard a lot from you guys is, hey, I'd love some more recipes. So here's a whole bunch more recipes. The top 5 symptoms are going to be weight, fatigue, insomnia, hot flashes, night sweats, and brain fog. I almost forgot the last one, which would have been really ironic, right? If I had forgotten brain fog. But yeah, the top 5 symptoms that come with hormonal transitions, and really good evidence on how foods can help those symptoms. And even if you're not clear what else is happening, what are their diagnoses, what are their steps, you can still make a big difference with the right foods. And here's how to use these foods in some great, delicious ways to help these symptoms. So it's broken down by those 5 symptoms, but you can also use any of them anytime. So there's great fill-in recipes. Diane's here with us. Hey, Diane, great to chat with you early this afternoon. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, these will be coming out really soon. And I'm also jazzed about this because the photography is beautiful. The team who did the food photography is excellent. Penguin Random House works with them quite a bit, and we've been very involved with the design on this. So this is a color book. This is one thing you want to have in your kitchen to display and have access to. So it's got some aesthetic qualities that I've not put into books before, but really jazzed about this. So yeah, the Hormone Healing Cookbook coming out soon wherever books are sold. There's not an audio version. So questions are coming in live. Vivian's asking one about lectins. Vivian, that's a great one. We'll talk about that for sure and touch on the broader quality of food intolerances and dietary intolerances. But there was a couple that were sent in before we got started, and I wanted to kick off with a few of these. So let me queue up a few of these pre-sent questions. Here was a couple that were about if the thyroid can heal, if it can fix itself in certain circumstances. And we had one asking if it's possible to shrink an enlarged thyroid using the thyroid reset diet. Another one if it's possible to heal the thyroid after radioactive iodine treatment for Graves' disease. And I'll talk about both of those. Just a follow-up comment, Lexi moved from Vegas to Henderson. I see, but lived in Vegas so long that it sticks. Yeah, and more people are aware of Vegas than they are of Henderson. But Henderson is a cool area. It's really nice. And then the Red Rocks State Park is a huge favorite place of mine. It's pretty wild. It's epic world-class climbing, and it's like half an hour from the Las Vegas Strip, which no one would guess. More Texans coming in, some more from Atlanta. Okay, so radioactive iodine, enlarged thyroid. So radioactive iodine, the general idea here is that it's done to destroy the thyroid, to slow it down. And in many cases, it's destroyed pretty close to completely. In other cases, it's destroyed partially. There's some remnant thyroid function remaining. And you could probably guess if it's totally destroyed, it's not coming back. So if it's gone in those cases, it's generally gone. But it's often not clear if it's totally destroyed or if there is some remnant activity. And I've seen people to where they thought that it was totally destroyed, but it did come back partially. And I've seen some cases where it came back completely. The high level idea I'd love you guys to take away from this is that the thyroid can repair itself a lot more calmly than you might imagine. And the main step for that really is the thyroid reset diet and then supplying just key essential micronutrients for its repair. And what those look like are the daily reset bundle, and that's from thyroid specific formulations. And then also if you've got measurable antibodies, we think about antibody support. But those basic steps, making sure you've got adequate iron, if iron levels are low, can go a long ways towards the thyroid healing itself. If you're on medication, you want a prescriber that understands how to de-prescribe. If they don't de-prescribe, your thyroid will never get a chance to start working by itself again. And this is really an art. If you just drop the medicine completely, that could be way too much stress on the thyroid. But if you never challenged it at all, it won't be challenged. It won't get better. It won't get stronger. But in many cases, it can. So yes, that's often possible. And as far as shrinking an enlarged thyroid, oftentimes as well. In those cases, the relevance of managing TSH is also important. If TSH gets way too high, the thyroid will grow. But if it's far too low and far too suppressed, it has no signal to heal. So it takes just some exacting management of that. And I'm hearing from Kathy waiting on a hurricane. Kathy, good luck with that. I just heard from another friend who's in Puerto Rico who was hit by one recently. And yeah, I wish you all the best down there. Lots more really good questions coming in, you guys. So for that one, yeah, the general idea is following the thyroid reset diet first and foremost. And here's some resources for you all. This will show up in the chat, and I can get this in the chat over on Instagram, if I do this right. Yep, here we go. I'm going to drop this in the chat on Instagram. And here's a whole bunch of free resources for the Thyroid Reset Diet. If you don't have the book, or if you have it and just want some more tips, just check those out. There's some food lists and things along those lines that can help you do that more effectively. Okay. Um, Lots of good ones coming in. Let me just jump on one real quick right now, and then I'll come back to these that were sent in advance. Here was one. This I just read this one briefly before, but this was from Vivian. And are lectins something to avoid? Legumes are a huge part of my diet, but wondered if they exacerbate symptoms. Yeah, Vivian, great question. So lectins, big topic. Let's touch on this. So, lectins are surface recognition molecules. They're little things that allow stuff in the microscopic world to know who's who. So, in the macroscopic world, imagine like ships out on the sea, and there's the big flags. I don't know which flags are which, but everyone knows the pirate flag, right? You see a pirate flag, okay, that ship is pirates, right? So, lectins are to cells what flags are to ships. It's that easy. They're cell recognition molecules. So some foods are famous for having lectins. You might be surprised to know that all living things, plants and animal, every cell has lectins. If you want a lectin-free diet, sorry, it's not possible unless you want to eat styrofoam. So everything has lectins. Now, some lectins are dangerous. No debate about that. And there's some foods we don't eat. There's other foods we only eat cooked, like kidney beans. If you have cups and cups of raw kidney beans, you can get really sick from that. Don't do that. Past that point, the whole thing about lectins has been pretty well sorted out. And not only that, but there's data arguing they are good for us. So there's been talk about lectins being dangerous, and there's often a kernel of truth. And the kernel of truth is the raw kidney beans. And that's actually true for other raw beans as well. Now, beans, no secret, can cause digestive distress for a lot of people. That has no, assuming they're cooked, that has nothing to do with their lectin content. So beans have a type of carbohydrate called trehalose, and this is a trisaccharide. It's a three molecule carbohydrate. That's unique. We don't find that in many other foods. Beans and legumes, to be really precise, we should say beans and peas, because legumes are comprised of beans and peas. But they also have a huge range of different kinds of fibers. So we think about fiber as a static thing, or maybe we talk about soluble and insoluble, but there are dozens of kinds of dietary fibers. And a healthy bowel flora is one that is fed from a variety of fibers. Your flora feeds off of fibers. That's it. If you cut out the fiber intake to your flora, it will starve. It's no different than taking an antibiotic. So we hear about diets that cut out all fibers and all plant foods. And for many people, they do reduce digestive symptoms, but they're just like taking antibiotics. They reduce symptoms because they shut down all flora, good and bad. So, yeah, you can kill the weeds in your garden if you stop watering your garden, but you ain't going to have a good garden afterward. So, yeah, if you've been low carbohydrate, if you've been avoiding a lot of foods, beans can cause symptoms. That doesn't mean you're reacting to lectins. It simply means that your body is not used to those types of carbohydrate. Your flora is too compromised. You've got too few variety of good, healthy flora. So think of it like exercise. You can lift some weights and say, oh, that hurt my back. I shouldn't lift weights. Well, maybe you should stick with it. Maybe you should take it slowly. Maybe you should also do some core training, right? And over time, maybe you'll do fine with it. And it's the same way with fibers. Yes, in many cases, if you add in way too much or you cut them out, you can change digestive symptoms. But that doesn't mean they're doing something bad. It's exercise. Your flora needs that. Your body is better off on a wide range of healthy plant foods. If your flora is compromised, you might need to take them slowly. You might need to add them in gradually, and that's totally fine. But Vivian, as far as lectins doing bad things to you, please don't worry about that. If you cook your beans at home, cook them the way we normally cook them. Cook them well. It takes a few hours to cook them, to get them broken down thoroughly. A little longer if you're way above sea level because the boiling point is lower. I love using an Instapot to cook them. Other pressure cookers work fine. If you're buying canned beans, this is not an issue. But high level lectins, they're all foods. So yeah, some foods are thought to be high sources of lectins, like beans or tomatoes. All living things have lectins. All living cells have lectins. You can't get away from them, and you wouldn't want to. Okay. Great question, Vivian. Um, wow. So Vivian, follow, and I love follow-up comments too. Makes more sense the way they link it to leaky gut. Yeah, and a paradox there is the whole leaky gut thing is often an issue of a compromised flora. So yeah, the healthier your flora is, the more you can resist bad bugs, and the less apt you are to have problems with leaky gut. And yeah, there's a lot of complex things about that too. Frankie, I follow the thyroid reset diet, big fan. And follow-up one, love my beans from Vivian. You know, beans, as far as overall health outcomes and longevity, there have been a lot of big papers showing that, of course, the foods we eat can affect our overall lifespan. And some foods do so more than others. Some of the larger studies really get granular and they break it down by categories of food and how much certain amounts of food categories affect our longevity. And so, of the foods that help us live longer, the quantity of the foods needed, legumes are in a class all by themselves. I did the math on a paper one day, and basically, oh, I think it was like 10 grams a day. It was some tiny amount. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number top of mind, but the amount of legumes needed to have a big impact on mortality was great, was much more, they were much more powerful than any other food category, including leafy greens. Leafy greens are good. I'm not dissing on them at all, but gram per gram, beans have a bigger positive impact on mortality than leafy greens do. And the benefits show up. I'm pretty certain it was not more than 10 grams per day. I wrote a blog on this many years ago and I measured out what that looked like in garbanzo beans. And it was like 2, 3 garbanzo beans per day. No kidding, as a daily average, can have a huge impact upon one's overall lifespan. So yeah, good things to add in. Don't be afraid of them. Wow, here's a quick one. Here's a follow-up comment too. I like your analogy, though. As a nutritionist, I agree. Omnivore is ideal. Yeah, for sure. We do better on a variety of foods. And follow-up comment: why does carnivore heal people? I'm not convinced that it heals people per se, but many do notice lower symptoms on a carnivore diet, and that's not the same as healing. Again, if you got a bad back, your back might feel better if you lay on the couch for a week, but that's not the same as healing your back. So yeah, and even further, there's a lot of things we can see show up in blood chemistry, like antibody levels, for example. I've heard many say that when they go on a carnivore diet, their immune system is less inflamed. Well, yes, that also can happen when you take high dose prednisone or do other things that suppress your immune system that can make it appear less inflamed. So there's a lot of ways you can change symptoms or change blood markers in the short term that may have nothing at all to do with healthier, good outcomes. So yeah, there's a few thoughts about that. Follow-up comment: lentils are way higher than folate than greens. Does make sense. Yeah, thank you for that. Our nutritionist here again. And again, I'm not dissing on greens. A diet should have all sorts of things, but just I think we've got a strong sense about greens being good. Yeah, beans and legumes belong right in those same categories as far as their overall importance. Um, okay, so let me grab a couple more of these that were sent in advance. There's a lot of awesome questions coming in. I want to grab more of these live ones too. So let me just clear some of these other ones out first. I'm going to get to where I can change what's displayed. Oh, this was a cool one. Couple that were here. Brief one: is it true that aloe can reduce thyroid antibodies and improve TSH and free T4 levels? So here's a great question. And I brought this one up because it really opens up. I want to share my thought process with you. Thyroid antibodies can go down for no reason whatsoever for about a quarter of people. So if you take a group of 1,000 people that have high thyroid antibodies and you have, and they all take aloe, well, probably a quarter of them will have their antibodies go down, but a quarter of them would have had their antibodies go down anyway. I've talked about this in terms of blue socks. So that sounds silly, but blue socks, right? So if 1,000 people wore blue socks, they would have their thyroid antibody levels go down for a while at least. But that didn't mean the blue socks caused them to go down. So because of problems like this, I put a lot of weight into what happens in large groups under controlled settings. I don't doubt that somebody somewhere took aloe and had their antibodies go down. Totally possible. But I also don't doubt that somebody had their antibodies go down by wearing blue socks. And I don't want to push blue socks if it's not going to work better than random chance. But random chance sometimes works. So when I think about what's useful in terms of lowering antibodies and in supplements, I spent about a year pulling together all the research articles I could find on diet, supplements, and thyroid disease, almost a year of full time work when I wrote the last manuscript. And I came across several supplements that actually were well documented for that. And those became the inspiration for antibody support. And those became the inspiration for thyroid specific formulations. There was really good data on nutraceuticals making a big difference for thyroid function. And what I saw was that the studies, there was high quality human studies showing, very specific outcomes, better than placebo and better than just random chance and safety. So that made me motivated to want to make those things available and not just be abstract research. So here's a quick note. I'll drop a link in the chat about thyroid specific formulations. And I made a blend that's specifically for antibodies. It's antibody support. The main ingredients in that are Nigella sativa, inositol, and selenium. And they've all been shown to individually and collectively decrease thyroid antibodies by dramatic amounts. So yeah. And related to that, supplements help thyroid that are not synthetic. So this is tricky. The word synthetic, that's a loaded word. In most cases, we think about synthetic things as bad, but synthetic really just means made by hand and designed, put together, constructed. So a lot of synthetic things you don't want to eat. They're just not even foods. But there are some things that are synthesized that are identical to what's found in nature. And when supplements talk about being natural versus synthetic supplements, it's a little bit misleading, right? So we have fat soluble and water soluble vitamins. Now, nearly all fat soluble vitamins are extracted from natural sources. So A, D, E, and K. They're extracted from natural sources. Natural versions of vitamin A, not a fan of. You can find vitamin A in concentrated fish oil. A mentor of mine, he died from liver failure from too much vitamin A from fish oil. It was totally natural. I'm more of a fan of synthetic beta carotene, which is the plant type version of vitamin A, because it won't kill you if you get too much. So yeah, natural doesn't always mean safe, and synthetic doesn't always mean bad. When we talk about any water-soluble vitamin, vitamin E, B vitamins, any of the others, they are synthesized. They're made in laboratories, and they're made in forms that are the same as what is found in foods. There's a couple of companies that uses what's called grow form vitamins. They'll feed synthetic vitamins to yeast and then put the yeast in a pill, and they say it's natural. It's the same thing. It's still a synthetic vitamin. And then there's a lot of companies that will add in a trace of a natural source and say they have, natural vitamin C. They put in something like acerola cherry, and they say our vitamin C is from acerola cherry. But if you dig down in the details, one of two things is true. Either they have a tiny fraction of a milligram of vitamin C, or they've got plain old synthetic vitamin C plus a tiny fraction of a milligram of vitamin C from acerola cherry. And they're the same, but you can't get a therapeutic amount simply by putting in a natural source. And then last up, we've got the minerals. And all the minerals, well, they're chemical elements. So there's no such thing as synthetic or natural. They're just elements. You can't change them if you wish to. But yeah, as far as vitamins go, there are natural sources. That's true for all the fat soluble vitamins. I do worry about vitamin A as opposed to vitamin A precursors like carotenoids. So I use carotenoids, they're safer, but all water soluble vitamins are synthesized. There's no way around that. So I'd love to say mine are all natural, they're better. That's just not true. And even the ones that say that, either they've got almost none in there or they're saying something that's just not true. So I wouldn't stress about the not synthetic version, but that's a question that comes up a lot, and it's a really good question. Okay, and I think I had one or two more, and let me just take a look at those. Yeah, here's one, and a couple quick resources. What is the optimal TSH for a person taking Armour Thyroid and weighs 150? So great question. So optimal TSH. Now, the medicine and the dose are kind of separate variables. The optimal TSH is a function really of one's age, gender, pregnancy status, hormonal status, those things cause some fluctuation on that. But with Armor Thyroid 150, you can also figure out how much your body would make by itself. How does that dose work for you? And I want to share with you guys a cool resource. This is a free dose calculator. I'm dropping this in our chat here right now on all these platforms. So you can go here and you can find out exactly how any dose of thyroid medication would work in your body. If that's more than you would need, if that's way less than you would need, and it'll let you know if you're taking that, how much your body would be making by itself. So yeah, free calculator. Are you on the right amount of thyroid medication? And you can plug in, you asked this question. So Armor Thyroid, yeah, you can put in the exact dose that you take and learn and put in your body weight, that 150, and learn how that dose is working in your body. So cool resource. Came out a while ago. You might not have been aware of it, but wanted to update that and share that with you guys. Last quick question here. Coffee, bad for thyroid health, autoimmunity. Some people are sensitive to it. It can greatly affect their sleep and their anxiety. And sometimes that changes throughout life. So some people get more sensitive to it as they age. Even if they tolerate it before, they may not over time. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that on the standard American diet, coffee may be the densest source of antioxidants. If your diet is highly processed and low in fresh fruits and vegetables, you may not get much for polyphenols. And that's why in many large studies, people who add in coffee are healthier than those that aren't. It's probably the only source of polyphenols that many Americans consume. If you've got a diet rich in polyphenols, does coffee help you? Maybe, maybe not as likely. But if your diet has no others, it may be a good thing. Now, if you don't have issues with sleep, energy, insomnia, weight, heart problems, if none of those things are factors for you, you tolerate coffee, it's probably harmless enough. One big thing, though, is that if your thyroid levels aren't stable, there have been several papers showing that coffee, even taken 6 to 10 hours after a dose of thyroid medication, may interfere with the absorption of the medicine. And that's not the creamer per se, it's just the coffee itself. So some people that can't get stable on their thyroid levels, coffee may be the culprit. And it may be the culprit even taken many, many hours after the medicine. Now, I'm not being paid to endorse a company, but Tirosint has been studied and has been shown to be better absorbed even if taken after coffee. So if you're in that boat and you can't get things dialed in, that can be one option besides giving up the coffee. The other thing some do is take their thyroid meds at night before bed and then stick with the coffee in the morning. But yeah, those are some big things to think about with it. And then the last one, just to share real quick, this was kind. Someone just wanted to write in, and no question, is thank you for sharing your knowledge. Well, thank you for taking the time to show your appreciation. I'm thankful for that. Okay. Ah, boy, lots of good questions coming in, you guys. Let me grab a few more of these. We'll get several more still. And I'm looking around. There's a bunch that are coming in on Facebook and YouTube. And let's see how we're doing on Instagram. Yep, lots of ones here too. Here's one I think I've seen before. Can you talk about B12 formulations processed through the kidneys? Can a formulation be bad for the kidneys? So Liz, yeah, B12, as far as harming the kidneys in normal amounts, not a big factor. Now, the amounts of B12 that are given are often just really high. And many people see high levels of serum B12, and they wonder about that and they worry about that. The emerging idea about B vitamins is that more is not better. And the trend among the more advanced supplements is to use amounts that are more like RDA amounts or closer to them. For quite a while, a lot of the low-cost vitamins would use massive, massive doses of B vitamins. Like you would see 500% of RDA, 5,000% of RDA. And the rationale was that these things were really cheap raw ingredients, especially when used in forms like pyridoxine HCl. And you know what? I'm going to come back to that. That might have been a synthetic natural distinction that could have been confusing for the prior writer. So I'll put a pin in the HCl thing briefly. But yeah, in many cases, they put in massive amounts of those. And it's almost kind of like McDonald's doing Super Size Me. You could get like a 60 ounce or a massive thing, and you feel like you're getting more. And it makes the consumer think it's a better bargain for them, or it's more powerful or more effective in some way. And for quite a while, that was the case on B vitamins. People wanted to put just huge amounts in their products. There's more data saying that you don't want huge amounts of B vitamins. You don't want none. But vitamins, minerals, hormones, all these things, they work best in a specific range. It's not the more the merrier. It's not none. So think about nutrients like a key for your car. If the key is gone, the car won't move. But if you've got the key and the car's not working well, 10 keys won't fix the problem. It's a different problem. And there's some point where 1,000 keys might even get in your way. So yeah, think about vitamins as keys. And in the thyroid specific formulations, I used optimal active amounts of B vitamins, but not huge amounts. There's no reason to take amounts that are way, way, way above what you would ever find in a healthy diet. So yeah, good question. So Kathy, yeah, maybe we don't need therapeutic amounts for vitamins. Maybe your bodies just need enough and no more. That's really it. And there's an idea, there's a mindset that, let's say, for example, let's take let's take B12. If someone's low in B12, of the many possible side effects can include fatigue. Totally true. This is like the key's not there, the car won't budge. Now, it's possible to imagine a scenario in which, okay, so if there's no B12, you're tired, but what if you got enough B12 and you're still tired? You could think that maybe more B12 would give you a boost. And this has been well studied. It doesn't. If you're lacking in B12, it'll make you feel normal. But if you've got enough B12, it's not a stimulant. It won't supercharge you. And that's true of vitamins and minerals across the board. What we're also learning now is that in big amounts, these things confound your liver and they stress it out. 20% of people who end up in emergency rooms with acute liver damage are there from too much vitamins. And this pains me. Many who see that data point want to avoid vitamins completely, but they can help. There's good studies saying they can be useful, but they've got to be given judiciously. So the right amounts, the right forms, the right combinations, and yeah, not just huge quantities of tons of things. Let's see, lots of good questions. Can natural progesterone interfere with levothyroxine absorption? I'm taking both at night, but I've wondered if I'm absorbing either as well. Melissa's asking about this. So Melissa, if you want to add more detail, so natural progesterone, we see this in different forms. There's topical forms, there's creams that one would apply to their skin, there's vaginal suppositories, there's pills that are taken. So in the case of pills of progesterone, oral progesterone, for sure, that can interfere with thyroid medication like any other pill can. In cases of topical or vaginal progesterone, okay, so you are talking about oral, definitely it can. And if you're taking your thyroid, take both at night. So progesterone is often sedating. It can often make you feel kind of groggy and tired. The name itself comes from gestation like pregnancy, and then own like hormone. So progestational hormone, progesterone. So it's the hormone of pregnancy. And it can make you feel tired and spacey. So it's often given at nighttime. Now, thyroid medicine can work taken at nighttime for many people when it's taken all by itself. But in those cases, you'd want to take it several hours after any food, other pills, or anything besides water. Taken together at the same time, your thyroid levels can be hit or miss. They can be erratic. Now, the other versions of progesterone, and that's for the absorption part. Now, any version of progesterone can affect thyroid binding globulin. And that won't make you not absorb your thyroid, but it will make less active thyroid hormones circulate. And that's something that, as long as you're on both medicines, they can be adjusted to compensate. But if you change either one, if you take more or less progesterone, it may change the needs for your thyroid as well. So just be aware of that for any form of progesterone. Let's see. Yeah, so follow-up comments. If you take meds at night, how does that look regarding spacing after a meal? Yeah, at least 2 hours after a meal. And in those cases, there still can be some times where there is malabsorption, but at least 2 hours is a good starting point. And that's true for 2 hours after any food, any other supplements, or any liquids besides just water. And it's also best taken as close as possible to bedtime. Our bodies make most thyroid hormone somewhere around like 2 or 3 in the morning typically. So that's what we're trying to approximate by taking it first thing in the morning. But taken at nighttime, you'd want it as close to night as you could to mimic that effect. Another follow-up question, what if B12 is recommended to get level up quickly for someone that has B12 of 230, not convinced it's a good thing, rapid versus gradual, it's a better option? Liz, yeah, if you're on the thyroid daily bundle, the thyroid daily multi, you've got an active dose of methylcobalamin, and I would track your scores on that. The data about oral methylcobalamin is much better than it was in the past. There was a time where we thought that B12 didn't work orally. And it's a little, you could debate back and forth about cyanocobalamin, but methylcobalamin does absorb orally for nearly all people. And conceptually, in our diets, we get small amounts, microscopic amounts, rather regularly, and they come into our bloodstream. So most can do well with that. The exception can be those that have rather advanced atrophic gastritis, also called thyrogastric syndrome. But that's not even the early stages, it's the more advanced stages where they can't assimilate B12. Most can do quite well with that. And I do prefer oral over injectable, as do most medical guidelines. Okay. Let's see. So related questions and comments. So yeah, does too much selenium bad? Kate, yeah, totally. I can make sense of that. Too much of it is. And not only is too much of anything bad, but what really is counterintuitive is that it's bad in the same way that too little is bad. So too much selenium causes a thing called selenosis. There was a time in which a company that was producing selenium supplements misformulated them, and many got selenosis. They lost pretty much all their hair. They had severe skin problems. They had some short term organ damage. And I saw someone clinically that had an early case of selenosis. He had vague complaints of muscle aches, fatigue, um, and also he was getting some patchy hair loss and he had some abnormalities on his blood count. Now, there's a thing called gingival stippling, which is like blue lines along the gums. He had those as well. And in medical school, I learned about that as being a sign of lead toxicity. And lead could have also caused the abnormalities he had on his blood count. So I saw all this. He did do some industrial type work. I thought he was lead toxic. So I did a toxicology screen on him. And as luck would have it, that screen also measured levels of selenium. I would have never suspected selenium. His lead was fine, but his selenium was way through the roof. And we looked over his supplements, and he was simply taking about, I think, 3,000 or so micrograms of selenium combined in a whole lot of different antioxidant blends. He was just overdosing on it, and it was totally making him sick. So we had him just stop that, and it cleared out, and he was fine over the course of a few months. So yeah, you can get too much. And a weird paradox is that too much can look like too little. And this is something that's come up, it's gotten really clear to me. There are those that have taken high doses of iodine and found that it was helpful. So here's the weird thing. Your thyroid often heals when you get less iodine coming inside of it. And there's two ways you can do that. One is by ingesting less iodine, pretty straightforward. The other one is you can take massive doses of iodine, and that actually shuts down the pump and it puts less iodine in your thyroid. So that has been shown to lower iodine and stop hyperthyroidism, and it's been used as a possible treatment for Graves. The drawback about it is that it doesn't always work as advertised. Sometimes too much is too much, and you can cause hyperthyroid storm. But yeah, those that may have benefited from high dose iodine, paradoxically, were actually getting low dose iodine. They were shutting down their thyroid from absorbing it. And this is the dosage paradox with nutrients. You need the right amount. Way too much or way too little. Not only are they both bad, but they can look the same. They can do the exact same thing. I'll grab a few more follow-up questions. Here's a great one, totally logical question for Frankie with us from YouTube. Can one eat too many Brazil nuts and get too much selenium? So, Frankie, thank you for that question. It's in the back of my head. The short answer is probably not. And there's different chemical types of selenium. There's one called selenocysteine. Now, there was a study done aptly enough in Brazil, and they took some children who were in preschool programs, and these were kids who were malnourished. They were low in food in general, not growing very well. And they took these kids, put them in two groups. One group was just kind of monitored, no big changes. The other group was given a pretty massive amount of Brazil nuts. I did the math on the grams and the dose. It ended up being about a quarter of their caloric intake. For an adult, it would be about like 30 to 40 Brazil nuts per day. Now, they measured selenium in a lot of ways. They measured how it was functioning in terms of these kids' glutathione performance. They measured how the body was excreting selenium in the nails and in the hair. And they measured how much selenium was building up in the body in the blood levels. And these kids, their glutathione metabolism improved and their overall health improved. They were excreting lots of selenium. Their nail and hair selenium levels were high, but their circulating levels of selenium were perfectly healthy. They weren't getting too much. So they didn't need that massive dose, but that happened to be a type that their bodies could clear. Now, there's also a type of nuts called paradise nuts, which grow in similar areas, similar soils, and they also have very high amounts of selenium, but they don't contain selenocysteine, and they can cause selenosis for people. So even though Brazil nuts have a lot, you probably won't overdose. And before this study was done many years ago, I was aware of the amount of selenium in Brazil nuts, and I encourage people to use them, but be cautious with them. After that study, if someone asked me if this study should be done, given all those criteria, I would have said no. I would have thought there was some risk to these children, but it so clearly did not harm them, and the body so clearly excreted it that it seems that Brazil nuts are quite safe over a broad dosing range. So Frankie, yeah, please take the thyroid-specific formulation, and the 3 to 5 a day, I wouldn't worry about that. You may get a little more than you need, but it turns out very precisely that the kind of selenium in Brazil nuts is a type your body can dump out if there's a little more than it wants. Now, I'm sure there's some point where that couldn't keep up. I wouldn't do 50 a day or more, but if you're doing a handful, even most days, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Okay. So related questions. Here's a couple more good ones about medication absorption. We talked about about B12 large doses with neurological damage. Is it important to have large doses of B12 if deficient to heal? Donna, back to our same point, it's important to not be deficient, but it's not important to have massive amounts. Once you've got healthy amounts present, the extra amounts aren't doing any benefits. And there's a lot of arguments by way they can simply strain the body further. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of mega doses of B vitamins. And this has evolved, but this really is the trend that's taking place in our understanding of nutrition. Okay, so a few more things about absorption are showing up. I'll get a couple more of these and probably wrap up. Oh, let me hide this message. Kathy's here. Kathy always has some good questions. Is salivary cortisol a helpful test for adrenal function? Yeah, great. The short answer is yes. Now, Kathy, another cool option, you can go to, I'm going to type this in, adrenalquiz.com. You can go there and you can get a pretty good gauge of your cortisol function via a quiz. I based this quiz on analyzing symptom surveys and salivary cortisol scores from several hundred people. So it's been clinically validated to be within 97% of the same data you would get from a salivary cortisol test. And it'll also give you some feedback on here's what your results are, here's some things you can do with that. And oh, I saw you said I did that. I love your cool quizzes. Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, you're really going to get the same data you would. The salivary cortisol tests are fine. They can be useful, but I did that because many people didn't want to test them often, couldn't get the kits easily. yeah, it's a great way to get that same data. So a few more that came in about absorption of medication. Let me grab these. From Sherry, can berberine supplement interfere with my Levoxyl? Now, taken at the same time as Levoxyl, anything you would put in that question, the answer is yes, besides water. So if you ask about chia seeds, or you ask about vitamin C, or you ask about acid blockers, or no kidding, besides water, anything that's taken with Levoxyl, the answer is yes. Now, an hour afterward, what about then? Well, in the hours afterward, there's data that insoluble forms of calcium, so like old-fashioned calcium supplements, like those from algae, those from bone, those from microcrystalline hydroxyapatite, um, uh, bone broth, those versions of calcium that are highly insoluble, that don't dissolve or absorb well, they may interfere even taken several hours later. That can also be true of high dose dairy supplements. That's one thing. Now, then coffee is the other, and I touched on that. And I saw a detailed question: is it the iron or the caffeine that slows absorption of thyroid medication? I drink decaf and caffeine free to increase palpitations. Yeah, we know that coffee does it. I haven't seen data that's looked at decaf versus regular calf. Now, Davey Boy Ride Bikes, that doesn't mean it's a problem for you. Most people that have some coffee hour afterwards can do fine, can have stable levels. So assuming your levels are stable and predictable enough, and they go up and down as one would expect when a dose changes, may not be a big factor for you. But yeah, if someone does have a hard time dialing in their dose and they do consume coffee afterward, they may consider dropping the coffee, moving their medicine to nighttime, or changing to liquid thyroid medication such as Tirosint. That's been shown to absorb okay even after caffeine. So yeah, after coffee, I should say. So some things are a problem even many hours later, but at the exact same time, almost everything is. The other thing that can be a factor for some time afterwards are acid blockers. So if you are on acid blocking therapy, that can be a cause to consider taking thyroid medications at nighttime. Now, I'd push back though, if you're on acid blocking therapy for more than short-term use, I would really push back on that and encourage you to talk to your doctor more so. The data about long-term use of acid blockers suggests that for almost all people, they're not a good idea. They raise the risk of hip fracture, of dementia, of nutrient malabsorption. Now, there are some rare cases where they are justified, where there's very advanced reflux disease, early esophageal cancer, signs of that being imminent. So it can be justified, but in most cases, it's really not. So yeah, they're not meant for longer term use, but that's one other category that can cause problems even after that moment of being taken together. Okay. Lots of stuff. Several good questions. I think I covered the bases pretty well, but let me get one last one here. Yeah, okay, here's our last question. This is from Aesthetic Love. When on Armor, it's hard to do a half dose if doctor wants to titrate up slowly. Any suggestions how to make this more accurate, as cutting up pills isn't ideal? Yeah, so great question. So a couple of thoughts about that. Yeah, so titrating a dose up slowly. Yeah, I won't go into, okay. Please read my article on deprescribing and look over closely the thyroid reset diet. You may not have needed it in the first place. It may not be the solution for you, but there's that. But to adjust the dose slowly, you're right, cutting pills is not ideal. Medicines that just have T4 absorb so slowly that there are times to where you can do a different dose on some days of the week that's not the same as others. And the average amount is still the same. But that's not true for versions that contain T3 like Armor. So cutting pills, you're right, is not ideal. It's hard to be precise. It can also change the absorption time frame. So the main solution there is to do quarter grain pills. They make a 15 milligram Armor. And when I am titrating a dose upward or downward, I would often have someone use 15 milligram pills and then take multiples of those, like maybe go from 1, 2 to 3 to 4 or whatever. Once you're stable, you can often use a larger potency pill to make it more convenient. But as you're titrating up or down, the 15 milligram pill is a good option to use. Okay. Benefits for nighttime NDT, no benefits. Nighttime dosing of thyroid meds is rather similar to daytime. Most studies suggest no disadvantage. Some studies suggest that it can be trickier. So it's more so if someone has an issue with taking it in the morning due to other medications or timing problems. Yeah. And then the last one was paddleboarding. Yeah, I've done a fair amount of that, not in the last week or so, but I'm probably going to get back out tomorrow. I love it. It's a blast. So thank you for that and appreciate the kind words. All right. This was Office Hours Live. Good to see you guys. Dr. Christensen with you. I'm going to pop up this cover again real quick. I think it's a really nice looking cover, and I'm excited about the whole graphics of this book and the design elements of it. So yeah, jazzed to share some fun recipes with you guys too. In the meantime, take great care, and I'll see you all. We're down for next week. So send in more of those questions. I always love to have those questions in advance so I can think them through, and love to get many live ones as well. All right, take good care.